We're going to turn now to maybe a little later in the stage of innovation and ultimately making sure these types of treatments and therapies are accessible to patients through sound coverage, payment, and reimbursement policy. So we'll turn it over to Joel White with Horizon Government Affairs.
Thank you very much. I saved you all from the slides and just do a little discussion here today, but it's hard to talk after that presentation. And I don't think it's hyperbole to say that we face challenges here in Washington, D.C. from a public policy standpoint. We see its impact in terms of where care is accessed and site of service, access to actual physicians, nurses, hospitals, et cetera. The affordability of that care and the cost sharing that people pay for it, and access to innovative new products. But to say that folks with rare diseases face a crisis in their normal everyday lives is absolutely not hyperbole, and I think that was just demonstrated here today. And it's a reason why me and Jen and others are so passionate about policies that promote innovation for people with rare diseases. And what I'm going to talk a little bit about today is reimbursement policy. Hopefully you won't go to sleep. But my background is I worked up here on Capitol Hill for Congress for about 12 years, 6 years at the Ways and Means Committee, and was fortunate to work on 9 different laws. Many of those dealt with Medicare reimbursement policies. And I can tell you that when you change reimbursement for something, it has a big impact. And generally, when you pay more for something, you get more of it. And when you pay less for something, you get less of it. It's a pretty standard economic principle. But I'll give you an example. Many years ago, when I was on the Ways and Means Committee staff, we were working on a program on how drugs were reimbursed in Medicare called average wholesale price, or AWP. And a lot of people joke that AWP means ain't what's paid. But it was basically a reimbursement structure that depended on what was reported for the price of the drug, and we switched that over to an average sales price, which meant that we were going to count up every sale in America and average that out, and that would be what would be reimbursed, and then we'd add 6% to that to cover things like administrative costs and overage and spillage and things like that, cost of administering the drug. And that had a major impact. The impact of that was that the budget, let's just say for oncology products, leveled out at about $12 billion, about $14 billion this year, but for the past 7 years, that has not grown measurably in the Part B program. And what we're seeing on the pricing side is prices are actually falling for the top 50 products in ASP, in Medicare Part B ASP reimbursement. And so that payment system is having a significant impact on the drugs that are used in the physician office. And there's not a manufacturer in America today who doesn't look at what's going on in the Part B market, and if they're developing a drug, and say, what's our reimbursement strategy once this thing gets approved? And so the way Medicare reimburses absolutely has an impact on innovation. And I can tell you, at least from my standpoint, there's a couple of threats going on in DC right now, and there's a couple of opportunities. And I'll talk very briefly about the threats because I'm an optimistic person. I like to focus on opportunities. But on the threat side, that reimbursement system that I just talked about, ASP plus 6, is how these products are currently reimbursed. Well, we've got a policy right now called sequestration. Sequestration is like a meat axe. It takes 2% off the top of every single bill and applies it, in this case, to the ASP plus 6. A logical person would have said, well, if it's ASP plus 6, let's take the 2% off the 6%, right? And it's just reduce that add-on payment. Well, the way OMB applied the sequestration was to the entire thing. So how it's calculated, the base cost of the drug plus the add-on. So it really took a hit on ASP, and what we're seeing now is a lot of strange movement in the marketplace for people and how they prescribe certain products, because some products, an average is by definition 50% above or 50% below, averaged out. Some products are underwater, and we're seeing movement away from those products. And that might not be the best thing for clinical care. So the reimbursement structure is actually driving site of service and clinical care. So the sequester is a problem. How do you fix it? I don't know. It's a 10 or 11-year problem. It involves hundreds, literally hundreds of billions of dollars. But what I do know is that without chomping off the whole big thing, take a little nibble and a little bite. Let's come up with actual stories and real-world hard data on the impact of sequestration on ASP, and then deliver it to Congress. And Congress can start making decisions. You all are very good at a lot of things, but you're very good at advocacy, because I've seen it in action. So that's one issue on the sequester. The second thing I would say is there's a thought about applying 340B, which is a mandatory discount program, to orphan products. I can't tell you the disastrous nature of that policy. It would basically say for your patient population, say it's only a 3,000 patient population, you would be forced to pay a discount on a product for a captive audience. And that would, I think, severely limit access to those existing products, and it also would change the direction or the decision making in those manufacturing companies about whether or not they want to get into a cold product or an innovative product to treat a rare disease. And the third thing is that we've heard a lot of talk around DC about the high cost of drugs. And I'll give you an example. There's a product out there right now that costs a little less than $100,000, depending on how you total it all up. And it cures someone, literally cures them of a disease. Now, the way we treat those patients before this product was that we'd let them get worse, get sicker, put them on interferon, which has an effect on the system as well, send them to the hospital. If they get a liver transplant, maybe they get a liver transplant. But all of that totaled up cost a little bit more than $100,000 a year just for the interferon and some of the therapy. If they got a liver transplant, it was a $500,000 procedure. So the cost of doing the baseline treatment was really high. The cost of the cure was less. But we're having this bizarre conversation in Washington now about we can't afford the less. Well, if we couldn't afford the less, how are we affording the baseline? How are we affording not to cure people, right? But this creates an opportunity, and that's what I want to talk about. That dialogue or discussion creates an opportunity to talk about value. Like I said at the beginning, if we pay more for something, we'll generally get more of it. Well, if the drugs are producing cures, literally cures, and we want more cures, we've got to pay more for the cure, okay? And maybe we pay less for other things. And I'll give you one example. In Michigan, one of my clients was involved in an oncology medical home. And what they said was, it's really bad for cancer patients to go to the emergency room or be admitted in the inpatient side. And so we want to pay less for that. How do we keep them out of the ER? And they said, well, let's go into this practice and we'll pay them to hire triage nurses over the weekend to keep cancer patients out of the ER or out of the hospital by saying, okay, you're dehydrated, let's hydrate you. So you don't have to go to the ER and spend $5,000 getting more fluid into your system. And they paid a little bit more for the drugs to help the practice afford all the case management activities that they did. What happened? They paid, like I said, a little bit more for the drug. They had a 68% reduction in inpatient visits and a 47% reduction in emergency room visits, just by making a simple little change. So is that paying for innovation? I would say yes, because right now what we're doing is really stupid. So let's take those little chunks where we can. Let's pay for the things we want more of, pay less for the things that we want less of. And I think in doing so, we'll start to see more manufacturers get involved in creating more innovative products that actually help cure people. So thank you for having me here today.
Thanks, Joel.